Hey, what's going on, guys? Pixel Gadget here. I've been a game designer for 10 years. In this video, you're going to be learning about retro FPS narrative design and all the ins and outs of telling a story through an FPS game. So, let's just get started. I found this meme and I felt like it perfectly encapsulates what we're going to do today. I'll do the voice, all right. Fuck, man, everything. I push buttons, I turn dials, I read numbers, and sometimes I make up little stories in my head about what the numbers mean. So that's basically what we're doing. That's what narrative design is. We're just making up little stories about the numbers in video games. All right, so I first want to clarify what makes a retro shooter narrative different from, like, AAA games, like the games we played when we were kids. When it comes to modern AAA shooters, generally higher budget, more money for animations and dialogue and stuff. I found this meme that kind of encapsulated the whole idea. And basically, I love this meme because this was the kind of child I was. I would like have Lego armies and like these like battles and things all the time. So in a way, I've been a narrative designer my whole life, really. And then you got retro shooters. This is what we're up to here. It's all about gameplay first. That's the main attraction, is the shooting and the jumping and the moving around the environment. The narrative's mostly delivered through environmental storytelling, and it's also marked by like very few interruptions in the gameplay flow. So we're really almost never taking control away from the player. However, all these rules are made to be broken. For example, like the only time this rule can consistently be broken, it's not a big deal, is if you take control away from the player in the beginning of the game or the end of the game, like the beginning of the level or the end of the level, because players have come to accept the fact that there's like going to be a pause between levels. So if you ever want like a narrative cutscene or whatever, or slideshow, for indie devs, that's probably the easiest thing, is like if you really want exposition, like cutscenes or whatever, slideshows are really good, where you've just got like image after image. Think about like the classic Fallout endings, where it's like a slideshow and it's like, this happened to this guy and this happened to that guy, little stories. And tone and atmosphere are pretty much the golden rule. I was saying in a previous video that I think the tone and vibe of the levels is like the most critical element to probably the entire game in a lot of ways. Now, what is the purpose of narrative? Why do we put narrative in video games? Well, first of all, it's fun to tell stories. I like telling stories, but it kind of builds a basis for the game. And number one is its context. So it establishes the world and setting. And it's like it's giving context to what the player is doing in the environment. And we have played some games like Ultra Kill, where like the first world level is like this foundry place, and the context is pretty limited, but you generally understand you're in like a hellscape fighting through demons, and that's kind of enough of world building context. It builds player motivation, like you might understand what you're trying to do or where you're trying to go. It helps with immersion. Tone and atmosphere, again, is like the big deal here. It just helps the player take on the role of whatever, like, the Doom Marine. The kind of thing is, you're a purifier. You're purifying the bad guys, killing the bad guys. Same with Dusk. And actually a lot of FPS games, honestly, it's overdone. But it's overdone because it works so well, this idea of being a purifier. It frames your actions. You're the good guy. You're killing the bad guys. Very simple. And it helps with flow. We talk about pacing a lot on my channel, and with FPS games, it's like pretty simple. We've got action scenes where you're shooting bad guys, exploration scenes, and then like preparation scenes. And exploration and preparation are kind of the same thing, but you're like preparing for the next fight, but it also is some breather room for the player to kind of take in the environment, However, we're kind of never slowing down the gameplay necessarily. The player's still running around the map doing their thing. They can skip the whole exploration phase if they want to. And some players do, but we're kind of catering to those players that want to kind of look for the secrets, find all the ammo, find all the armor and health and all that stuff. But we're giving the player the option. That's kind of rule number one of narrative design, is everything should be skippable. All cutscenes should have a skip. All exploration should be relatively skippable. And environmental narrative obviously is skippable kind of by default, where it's like you can just run right past it and you don't have to worry about it. Okay, yeah, core principle, gameplay comes first. This is kind of what I meant by the whole thing. I love this meme. I could just put anything in this and it's going to be funny. Okay, so yeah, retro shooters, it's all about mechanics and stuff. So as much as I love telling stories and things, I do understand that basically the story is kind of the set dressing for the fundamental thing of shooting the bad guys feels good. Like, I'm never going to make a game where the story is like ultra polished and the dialogue and a professional voice actors and all these cutscenes, and the gameplay of actually shooting the bad guy feels like really bad, feels like flat, feels like Unity prototype. Like, no. We build the like fundamentals of FPS design, just like Crash Course real quick, is player controller first. Before shooting, you always build out that player controller, make it feel punchy, make it feel the way you want it to feel. Then shooting, then enemies, and then everything else, right? Environment, whatever. You want to build the player controller before you build your enemies and environment, because those are going to be built off of how the player interacts with the world. So no long cutscenes. If you're going to have a slideshow or cutscene, keep it below 30 seconds or a minute. No forced walking sections. Don't try not to gate the player too much. You can take them down like long hallways and stuff for just kind of breathing room, maybe right after an action sequence. That's fine. And yeah, that goes into excessive exposition. But the golden rule is you're never interrupting the systems, and it's most effective when it's alongside the gameplay, not replacing it. So that's kind of the big thing. That is what we're like focusing on with all this narrative stuff. It's kind of the do's and don'ts. And then we're going to get into the do's in a sec, but this is like the important part, because I feel like some folks don't realize how these decisions make or break the game in a lot of ways. You'll lose so many players if you have a 5-minute cutscene before gameplay starts in your FPS. And this isn't true for all games. Some games, a 5-minute video in the beginning is like fine, and depending on your target audience, they'll love it. If it's a narrative walking sim, yeah, they're going to watch the whole thing. It's going to be great. But retro FPS players have come to, their fast movement, intense combat. Like, that's kind of what, and there's a specific phenotype for that kind of player, and I've just noticed they like to get into the action fast. So let's keep moving. Okay, this is like the fundamentals of narrative design in general, is define your core fantasy. So every shooter narrative should begin with a clear fantasy. So I've got my fantasies here. No, I'm just kidding. I love this meme. No, this left one's more like my core fantasy, honestly, in life in general. This is literally how I see myself, guys. I hope you understand. So whoever wants to make a video game where this is the core fantasy, being a cat, yeah, I'll buy it. And you should make that game, honestly. I should make that game. Actually, don't make that game. It's mine. It's my idea. Okay, so the core fantasy is like the cornerstone of your entire narrative, and every single piece of narrative information or emotional beats or whatever, I'll define emotional beats in a sec, is built around this core fantasy. So, and because the fantasy determines everything about your game, narratively speaking, and also mechanically in a lot of ways. Enemy types, weapons, environments, tone, narrative themes, like the kind of themes you'll be covering. When I say narrative beats, it's like all it literally means is like when something happens in the narrative, or the player learns something new, or reads something, or sees something, or whatever. It's like anything to do with emotional, informational, like information about the world, emotional information about the world. Anything like that is technically an emotional beat or a narrative beat because it is kind of expanding on the story, right? And here's some classic examples. Doom, very simple. Destroy the forces of hell. Defend humanity. Save the world. Easy peasy. That's the fantasy. You're the hero. A lot of FPS core fantasies are you're the hero killing the bad guys. And that's basically kind of the way it is. I mean, you can have other core fantasies and stuff and experiment, and I want to experiment definitely, but this is the tried and true. In Quake, you're fighting through these twisted dimensions. It's basically the same. Dusk, it's all the same. A medieval, it's all the same. Okay, fantasy, enemies, whatever, But sometimes the core fantasy is defined by the theme. So this is all about magical weapons. Doom was all about like kind of industrial cold metal, like, iron and steel kind of deal. That rhymed. That was cool. Okay. And here's a basic simple story structure for you to get started. So the classic 4-act arc has been used time and memoriam in films and media for literally since the Stone Age. Like if you look back on the oldest stories in the world, like the Odyssey, all this stuff, it all follows the 4-act kind of hero's journey, if you've ever heard of that. And it's very simple. The beginning player enters a hostile world, interaction, kind of learning about the core conflict. I'm going to go into a lot of detail here because I think it's important. Designing stories and narratives is actually pretty straightforward. And I remember about 6 years ago, I'd decided I want to learn narrative design. And the way it happened was just telling stories, like just writing stories, writing short stories, making up stories in my head. And honestly, dreams helped me a lot. But the main thing I've noticed is when I'm telling a good story, the introduction introduces your character, like, oh, this is you, and that's kind of the first thing it introduces, and then the problem. There's always a problem or conflict. So it's like, you're the space marine, and there's all these demons that have killed everybody and invaded Mars and the world. Okay, great. Like, the player or the story needs to have conflict. If it's all good guys having fun all the time, it's going to be a really boring story. And then the middle is always like kind of increasing the stakes, increasing the fighting, like increasing the bad guys are getting stronger, whatever. And then there's other parts to this narrative structure that are like subparts, and I could make a whole video talking about that, but this is just the basics. And then the climax is like the ultimate, like, oh, who's going to win? Who's going to die? Final battle. And then every game needs a resolution. A lot of games and movies, like indie games, they skip the resolution. The resolution is the most satisfying part of your story. And if you skip it and just have like big boss fight climax and skip resolution, oh man, you're missing out on some major narrative real estate right there, because literally a 30-second slideshow of like, and now the world is saved and everyone's happy again. Bro, that's like the bread and butter right there. That is such a good emotional payoff. Because this whole time you're building emotional tension. People are dying. The bad guys are winning. Oh my God, we have to kill them. Oh my God, we won. Everything's awesome. That's what we're going for here. So when it comes to gameplay integration, it's all about how the structure supports the gameplay. Okay? The complex storytelling is not necessary. Like, we don't need to go into crazy detail on what's going on exactly. These basics of bad guy killing good guy. Good guy. I killed bad guy, like, it's no big deal. But what I love about game design and FPS design is that if you want to make a complex, amazing story and weave it into the gameplay, you can. Just look at Half-Life. There's so many examples. Like BioShock and Half-Life are kind of the games that I think of that just deliver story perfectly for an FPS game. And we're going to get into all that as we continue. All right, environmental storytelling is like the basis of how you're going to do this thing. It's the primary narrative tool, and it's not about explaining events. It's about showing. Maybe you've heard in writing advice, show, don't tell. Well, this is, for FPS games and for video games in general, this is the principle. So when the player is walking through the environment, they're just taking in information constantly. And our brains are constantly creating narratives. So actually, the truth is, environmental storytelling and design, we're not doing the work. The player is doing most of the work. Their brain is automatically running in the background trying to piece together a story. We love stories. Our brains love explanations and stories and structure. And we like to know how things happen in the world. So basically, when we show the player a destroyed city and like the damage of war, they're automatically going to want to know, like, because it's like the aftermath. Showing the aftermath is the easiest way to do environmental storytelling. Oh, something bad happened here. The easiest, simplest way to do environmental storytelling is to have a body, like, somewhere, and have the circumstances of the death of that person be like precarious. Like, something happened to this guy. What happened to this guy? How did he die? You know, these are questions. So you want the player to be asking themselves questions about, how did this happen? How did this person die? Who is this person? Yada, yada, yada. And you do not want to tell them all the information right away. If in the first room there's a dead dude, in the next room there's how he died. And in the next room, it's like who he was. And in the next room, it's like why he died. What's happening in the grander scheme of things. And like what his death meant, or this or that. Or who he was in the grand scheme. Who knows? These three things here are like kind of classic video game narrative stuff. You've seen it all before. And BioShock and Half-Life do all this. I don't know if Half-Life has cult symbols and ritual sites. They kind of do. Anyways, destroyed cities, war damage, classic. Blood trails, abandoned equipment, dead bodies, classic. Cannot go wrong. You cannot go wrong. And then cult symbols, rituals. This, like anything mysterious or strange, can go in this category. So, yeah, basically one thing to keep in mind is in a fast shooter, we're kind of relying on these archetypes because everything's moving so fast. So we're relying on red. Blood trails are great because red pops, and the player's going to be like paying more attention to that, depending on the color palette of your environment. I do not recommend your main color palette for your environment being red, because that's kind of missing out on some really good signifiers for like, hey, look at this. Hey, player, come over here. Okay. I love this meme, but this is like kind of the core idea. Never force, always flow, bro. So we're talking about story delivery on this slide. How do you deliver the story? Like, what are the actual mechanics? How is it done? Well, games like BioShock basically have left us a perfect blueprint for how to deliver story without interrupting gameplay, and to make it all completely optional. So short text briefings are good. Maybe before the player enters the level, it's like a short little briefing. Maybe a guy is talking. When it comes to really important text information that's going to be presented to the player, I highly recommend voice actors or some kind of voice saying it. Just decreases the friction and helps the player kind of maybe engaged in the world. It's also another opportunity for narrative, because the character that's speaking could have a certain cadence to their talking. Like if it's a military guy, if he's got a rugged military voice, we got to take the position before the enemies, you can like kind of do that. Okay, simple intro cutscenes are totally awesome. Short level descriptions before the level starts, awesome. Audio messages. I think these are awesome because they bring your world to life. They're completely optional. The player walks up to it, clicks on it, and walks away, and the audio message keeps playing. I just started experimenting with like audio log messages, like BioShock style, in my game. And I may make a video about that at some point. I'm still working on it. Obviously, the hardest part is writing good audio messages, because that's a whole other writing style, is telling kind of almost like a mini narrative. And 9 times out of 10, the audio messages of someone who's like dead. So you find the dead body, and then there's the audio message, and you want to know how they died, right? That's like classic BioShock. Environmental clues is also S tier. Absolutely S tier. And notice how I combined environmental clues with audio messages, where it's like the audio message isn't just like sitting on a random table in the middle of an empty room. There's like a body there, and there's a this there, and there's a dead dude there, and whatever. It explains like, okay, this audio message has a story behind it before I even click on it. And then when I click on it and hear what happened, it just adds another layer. This whole process is about layers. Not one single story delivery method is better than the others, but when layered on top of each other, it's like this huge compounding effect, and it builds out the world. Okay, some key rules, and just to be clear, these are not actual rules. They're just kind of general principles. They are meant to be broken. It's okay to break these or twist these. It's your game. You know what's best. Okay, information should be delivered quickly and clearly. Yeah, I've been saying that this whole time. One thing I really want to say about writing dialogue, writing anything, text, is you're going to write out your text, and then you're going to cut half of it. And I remember the first time I heard this, I was like, what, bro? I worked so hard. I'm telling you, less is more. So you're going to have a paragraph of 4 sentences. You're going to cut out 2 of those sentences. And you can combine and whatever, but less text is better. And then I've heard people even say, then you're going to cut it in half again, which I don't know if that's necessary. I mean, we're indie developers. Like, it's all good if you want to have a little more text. It's fine. You don't need to stop playing to get the story. Yep, keep it moving. Always flow. Never force the story on your players. I know when I was into narrative design in the beginning, I was like, my story's so epic. The players are so dumb. I have to force them to watch my things. No, all cutscenes should be skippable, and all dialogue should be skippable, all narrative stuff. No long interruptions, and brief radio messages are better. You don't want extended dialogue trees and all that. You can have that, and it works great, but wouldn't recommend it. Okay, tone and atmosphere is huge. Tone and atmosphere is so important. I think it's more, I was saying in a previous video, I think it's more important than your actual level design. I'm not saying level design isn't important, but the actual tone of the levels, like the temperature of the levels, if that makes sense, the vibes, is so important to player engagement and contrast. Like, all this stuff I'm talking about follows this rule of contrast, where I believe the most, and this is like kind of almost like the thesis of my channel, of my entire channel. My entire design philosophy is I believe contrast is the most important thing to consider. So having contrast of tone and atmosphere between your levels is the biggest, most important thing I think to have in your levels. So here I say, like, tone's more important than your plot, and it absolutely is. A strong tone is the basis of your narrative. It's not connected to the narrative. So your characters and what they're doing, that's all good stuff. Okay, that's great. But the tone of the story and the atmosphere of the environment is what's actually building out the engagement. That's what players, I think, really engage with, and I'm no expert. But anyways, here's some genre archetypes. Horror. Bro, horror gamers have it so easy. I mean, horror game devs have it so easy when it comes to this stuff. I'm telling you, horror games with the bodies and the blood. I was telling you about how bodies are awesome. Like, think about how, okay, if I walk into a room and there's a dead dude and he's just sitting there and he's just dead and there's no blood, nothing. Think about how different that is from walking into a room and a dude is hanging from the ceiling because he killed himself and there's like, I don't know, like chaos in the room or something like that. Think about how that tells a completely different story. Why did this guy kill himself? What the heck happened here? How did he do all this? Why did he kill himself? All this stuff. So you got horror, dark fantasy, retro sci-fi, industrial dystopia. These are all like the core things. There's obviously more archetypes that you can explore. That's what I love about the freedom of games. And yeah, tone is created through visual style level architecture, verticality, things like that. The more verticality you have, generally, like the more like oppressive it might feel to the player if there's more like stuff, like areas they can't get to that are above them. Music, sound design, that's all very important. Enemy design is actually huge. The types of enemies you have. And here we go. Enemies as narrative elements. This is really important. So the kind of enemies that your players are shooting at or fighting in the game is connected to the narrative in a big way. So some of the classics are zombies, demons, robots, cultists. This is like the bread and butter. I love robots. In my game, I use robots because they're just so easy. I like them a lot. You can break all kinds of biological rules with them. They don't even need legs if you don't want them. Also, the composition of your enemies kind of tells a story in a way. Most players have come to expect that as they play through your game, the enemies get harder and the composition of enemies get more complex. But it also kind of tells a story in a lot of ways. And then, of course, the classic is the boss enemy always represents the narrative climax. How many games have you played where at the end it's like this big boss and it's the end of the game, it's all on you, and it's this? That's how it's connected. So fundamentally, enemy design communicates information about the world, and that's kind of my big thesis for this whole talk, is that narrative design is fundamentally you communicating with your player. So you're having a conversation with your player, and that's really all it is, and we're taking care of our players. You know, here in Pixel Gadget Channel, we take care of our players. Rule number one. I'm sorry. That's what we do. We take care of them. We care for them. We make sure they have a good time. That's our job as game devs. Okay. level themes. I've already kind of talked about this, but it's like within a game. So we talked about the tone and atmosphere, right? But I want to talk about the actual overarching. I don't want to talk about the overarching and talk about from level to level, and this kind of plays into the contrast where it's like, let's say level 1 is this military base, and then level 2 is the ancient temple, then the city ruins, then the alien world. And that helps communicate, okay, you're in a new chapter. And this is for bigger games. Some of us, like my game, it takes place kind of in a single level, but it has like 2 distinct like sections. But you get the idea, right? Consequences. Let's say you start at a military base and everything's fine, and then it's like, oh, something bad happened and now we're in the city ruins. That communicates to the player that the story is affecting the gameplay without actually affecting the gameplay. It's affecting the environment, and they're learning what happens through the places they explore. I think that's super cool. Okay, music themes. This is really important, and I feel like the slide could be like more detailed, but basically this meme kind of encapsulates it. I love the cat memes, bro. Dude, this music goes so hard, it's insane. Like, who doesn't hear that and doesn't think, hell yeah, dude, let's freaking go, bro? Like, the most badass hype music ever. Anyways, so the music is the narrative fuel. It gets your player hyped to experience your game and also to understand the tone, and it's part of the tone and atmosphere. And it's just really awesome stuff. But it's part of the communication. It communicates to your players certain things. Like, the music we just listened to is like telling us this world has soul. Like, this is not a cold, calculated military shooter. This is like an emotional, badass adventure. And it also, like, boss music notoriously will tell the player, hey, this is a dangerous situation, kind of pay attention. Or this fight is important. You can have like creepy music saying this place is cursed, something bad happened here. And that's all I want to say about music themes. But it is very important, and I could make a whole video talking about it. Kind of getting towards the end of the presentation here, this is kind of bringing it all together. Mystery, player identity, replayability. Mystery and exploration is a hard to explain and hard to grasp aspect of this whole thing, and it's something I think that just comes with experimentation. You don't want to give the player all the answers in any story, because players like a mystery. Players like unanswered questions on some level because it encourages them to explore deeper. They want to know. And so you need to kind of dangle the carrot a little bit and be like, no one knows what happened at Facility 95. But, you know, the answer is deep down, dark below, and you're going in and you're figuring it out. Whatever. You don't want to tell them exactly what has happened to a place or to a people or whatever. So having mysteries, unexplained technology, strange symbols, this just takes experimentation and experience, and I don't expect anyone to figure this out day one. And it's all about player identity. I mean, when you're developing your narrative, you're also kind of giving the player a role to assume. And in most shooters, you're like a solo soldier, the savior, the hero, and you're this like kind of warrior, whatever. And it's not amazingly necessary to flesh this out. All you have to really say, if you really want to add like an explicit thing to it, like at the beginning of the game, just say like, this is our most promising warrior and we're sending him out. Like, I don't know, you're the chosen one. That's pretty much maybe all that's really needed. And then replayability is kind of a big deal. Like, the more kind of mystery and exploration you have in your game, the more your players are going to want to return and replay levels to find secrets, to discover things. So basically, these kinds of elements, they reward exploration and foster community discussion. Players they love a mystery because they're going to talk amongst themselves about what's going on, what does it mean. So it's kind of just a good overall thing for marketing in a lot of ways. Okay, I love this meme. This is me, honestly. This is how I feel when I'm talking about this stuff. Okay, here's the checklist. So, question number 1. Does the story support the gameplay fantasy? Yes or no? This is the big question. Every time you are writing a narrative element, creating a new character or a sequence, ask yourself, does it support the core fantasy? If yes, great. If not, redesign. Is narrative delivered without interrupting player controller? This one's pretty simple, and some folks aren't going to listen to me, and they're going to be like, I'm going to interrupt the player all I want. Hey, it's fine. It's your game. You know what's best. It's not my game. Every game is unique, but I generally am recommending you to not interrupt the player too much, especially with FPS. Does the environment tell part of the story? This is like the big deal. I would definitely spend a lot of your production time making the environments look like they're lived in. What was the ask yourself some sub questions. What was the purpose of this place before the player got there? What were the people that lived here doing? How did they live their lives? How did they survive? These are the questions. And that'll be in another PowerPoint talking about level design at some point probably. Next question. Do enemies reflect the world's themes? If you've got a sci-fi game with kind of like medieval zombies running around, that could totally work. I actually could totally see that working. Like, that would be awesome, actually. But generally, they don't quite fit, and they don't really reflect the themes or whatever. So yeah, you kind of want it to match. Does each level communicate something about the world? Yeah, if you have a big level or a bunch of small levels, try to have contrast between the levels, narratively speaking. Okay, so this is like the prepping military base, and all the stuff is like, in order, and it's chaos, everyone's getting ready for the battle, and then the aftermath of the battle, and then the city that's been destroyed because we lost the battle. Like, it all tells a story. And next question, is the tone clear and consistent? Keeping the music consistent, keeping the color palette generally consistent. But that's actually a rule that honestly kind of should be broken with the contrast we've been talking about. What's fresh on my mind is Ultra Kill. Between the levels, there's like a huge amount of color contrast, and that actually makes the game way better. It's crazy. That game breaks like all these rules. So don't listen to anything I'm saying. Next question, does the story encourage exploration and curiosity? Having a generally mysterious story and mysterious setting is just stacking the odds in your favor for telling a good story and having good narrative in your game. It's really good. Okay. Final insights. I love these memes. I'm sorry. These memes are great. Okay. Your story, it doesn't have to be complex. It's about clarity. Okay, clarity is very important. Tone and atmosphere. It needs to support the gameplay, strengthen the world you're building, be mysterious, and enhance immersion. That's all you gotta know. And my final thing is a great retro shooter story should feel like a world the player is fighting through, not a story they're forced to watch. Right? So it's like you are moving through this world and you're experiencing it kind of at your own pace. You're discovering it as you go, and it's not being forced down your throat through forced like cutscenes. I feel like every game designer kind of knows that forcing a player to watch long cutscenes is not great, but I'm just outlining it here for you guys and telling you explicitly this is what you're going for. This is what we want. All right, they are uncovering the story themselves. We want them to feel smart. Okay, there's so many things I feel like I should have mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, but yeah, this is when it comes to exploration and mystery, you want the player to feel smart, like they're figuring it out, they're piecing it together themselves. That's why you don't want to tell them the whole thing off the rip, because you're robbing them of that I'm so smart moment. I figured out what happened to these people, whatever. In conclusion, thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something about narrative design. I'm ready for a long nap. I'm tired. But yeah, it's been fun, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I just wanted to appreciate everyone, all the new subscribers, everyone who's recently been checking out the channel. The channel's been kind of blowing up recently with some of the videos I've been making about Ultra Kill. I'm hoping this video engages people and you find the information I'm presenting interesting. Definitely let me know what you thought about this in the comments. I was a little nervous doing this presentation, I gotta be honest, because I'm like having imposter syndrome, because I'm just nervous about presenting this information and acting like an expert. I'm not an expert. I don't know everything. Like I've said before, it's your game. You know what's best for your game. Every single game requires kind of a very specific narrative treatment, and I don't claim that this PowerPoint is law. All the things I talk about should be broken, like the principles. They should be broken. They should be adjusted to fit your game. Absolutely. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching. I had a great time explaining this to you all, and I'm just grateful for having the opportunity to share this information, because I paid a lot of money for this information going to college, and now I'm sharing it for free. So everyone gets to learn. I think knowledge about game design should be free, and it should be accessible. So here we are. So thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.